Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Spanner Man again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about a error that I found on my Stihl USG grinder. I found it some time ago, but I didn't publish the error, so I'm going to publish to those people that are on YouTube that can maybe, if they want to check theirs. This really affects hedge trimmer blades. It won't have a dramatic effect on the top plate cutting angle. The angle that I'm talking about on a Stihl USG grinder, there are three angles. You've got A, B, and C. A refers to the head that moves. This affects a top plate cutting angle. It also affects hedge trimmer blades, and it's also used for circular saw blades. So that's A, the actual grinding wheel head moves from left to right. Goes from -15 to +50. That's done through the adjustment on the back here. You've got B, which is the movable vise. The vise goes from +40 to -40. And you've got the top plate, which is this scale here. This goes from +60 on one side and to the other side, if you want to call it -60. So left and right, 60 degrees, which is a fairly large scale. So after unboxing the Stihl USG grinder, when I looked at it, as I'm looking at it now, I'd noticed that the motor looks on a slight angle. That was the first thing that caught my attention. And I thought, oh, that's a bit odd. That should look fairly straight, because I've got various other grinders and the same thing. The Oregon type grinders, the motor's on the other side. And at the 0 or 90 degrees on an Oregon, it looks horizontal, whereas this doesn't look horizontal. You can see that it's off by a couple of degrees. So I thought, I need to check this. Various ways of checking. You could use a digital angle gauge. That was one method. You could use a gauge like this, and that's one way of doing it. The easiest way to do it was using a square that I use in sheet metal. So this is 150mm square. And if we zoom in, we'll go right in, and I want to show you that angle there. Now, you can clearly see that the wheel is crooked, which is really bad. And what I will show you is the actual marking that's on the Stihl USG grinder now. So we'll take the camera here, we'll bring it around here, and I want to show you this marking. Now, there's two markings there. You can see the marking on the bottom is from Stihl, and the black mark is my mark. So we'll put it on my mark. We'll just adjust this again. After I found out this problem, it was easy to rectify. It was just a matter of stamping. I'll just get this on 0. Okay, so we'll just take that off so you can see that. So there it is there. I've got it up on my mark at the moment, the black mark. So that's the 0 degrees. Okay, so what we'll do now is just put this camera back on the stand. We will do the same thing with the wheel. And you'll find out now, I'll just see if I can go up a little bit higher on this. You'll find out now that if you're to look, you'll find out that it's almost perfectly level now. Look at that. That's a darn sight better than what it was before. So that error is easily corrected by stamping a new mark. Or possibly you could return your USG grinder to Stihl and complain about it. Possibly they'll put a new mark on it. Now, if you're using the scale A, which is the head that moves, if you're using it for your chainsaw chain, being out a few degrees won't have a dramatic effect on your chainsaw chain, because it's only out a few degrees. Because the standard setting for the Stihl top plate angle, so that's the angle that the grinder comes in on the tooth like that, that's the top plate cutting angle. Still recommend 40 degrees. Oregon type grinders that do other sort of chains most of them are recommended a 60-degree angle on a Oregon or a 30-degree angle on a Stihl. Oregon use 90 degrees for their vertical reference point. Stihl use 0 degrees as their vertical reference point. I prefer the Stihl 0 degrees as reference point because when you move it to 30 or 40 degrees, you are moving to the scale 30, 40 degrees. The reference on the Stihl is using the horizontal plane. So what they do is they're using 0 degrees as their reference point, and they're saying 60 degrees. So they move up to 60 degrees. So it's this angle here that they're talking about is the 60 degrees on the top plate cutting angle. The actual movement from 0, from vertical, is moving only over 30 degrees. So that's where their 60 degrees comes from, because they're using 90 degrees as their reference point. So you're only tipping over to 60 degrees, which means that you only move 30. So on the Stihl USG grinder, you can tilt the head over to 30 degrees and you'll end up with the same angle. The only difference is on the Stihl grinder and the Oregon type grinders is that the Stihl is the opposite. The grinder or the motor's on the different side, and you tilt to the left on a Stihl, you tilt to the right on an Oregon type grinder. So that was the error that I found. I did email Stihl about it, so I guess we'll see what happens in the future about that. As I say, it's just a matter of punching a different mark on there. It's no big deal. The actual scale itself, that's the scale on the side here, is dead accurate. I've checked it. This scale here is also dead accurate, as well as this scale here. Now, this scale here is interesting enough. If we zoom in, you'll see that it goes from minus 40 to, you got minus 40 there, 0 in the middle, and plus 40 there. That actual scale is in millimeters, not in degrees. So if you were to put I measured that, that is a little bit different than the Oregon. It does the same effect. It gives a 10-degree downward tilt, but it's also probably used I've never used the vise to do circular saws, which the Stihl, you need the attachment. Generally, I'm using the vise for chainsaw chain. So I'm normally going 10 degrees for downward tilt. Still don't recommend the 10 degrees downward tilt. I recommend the 10 degrees downward tilt on all full chisel chains, because that's all I ever use is full chisel. Reason I recommend it is you've got less hook. If you got less hook, I live in Australia, which we've got extremely hard wood, and if you've got a lot of hook, it's quite easy to damage the hook. And I feel that with less hook, it stays a little bit sharper. Yeah, that's my preference anyway, full chisel chain. Reason I prefer full chisel chain, it's more aggressive, it cuts quicker, but it does dull a little bit quicker. So I tend to go to 25 degrees on the top plate angle, and on the top plate cutting angle, which is the angle that the grinding wheel comes down, so that's the top plate cutting angle, I generally running 30 degrees on the Stihl or 60 degrees on a Oregon grinder. The only other thing that I did on this particular unit, I made up this, we'll just see if we can zoom in so that you can see it. I made this quick release clamping mechanism. It's just a matter of moving the lever, and you can rotate just by moving this, you can rotate the head very, very easily. So I really wish it had something like this. And the only other thing that I did do was, we'll just see whether you can zoom in and see this. I ended up putting a little bit of stainless steel here with 3 markings. And those 3 markings is 40 degrees, 35 degrees, and 30 degrees. They're the ones that I use a lot because that's set at 30 degrees there. That's my 30-degree marking. That's the one that I use. There is more room on this side here. I really wish the scale would have been this side, because 9 times out of 10, the head or the motor is, this unit is always leaning to the left, giving much better vision on this side, and not to mention this large part here interferes a little bit with your ring spanner, whereas if you were to use the ring spanner on the standard nut, you've got more movement on this side. So really would have liked to have seen the scale on this side, the A scale, rather than the A scale on the other side. The only other criticism that I would say is that the cable entry is on the side, which would have been better on the back, and also the off and on switch is at the side and would have been better on the front. On the older type Oregon units, the switch is on the front and the cable comes out the back. Now, just to recap briefly before we go, that error that I'm talking about, that's around about near 3 degrees being inaccurate on the A scale, I'm not the only person to have mentioned this, because when I found out that something was wrong, I'd mentioned it in a user group, and I had about 4 people that came back and said, yes, mine's been like that. I've lived with that for the last couple of years, but they compensated for the error. They knew something was wrong, but they never actually measured it, but they felt that it was out. So after I'd posted a few pictures using the square, then they checked theirs and said yes, and they made a mark on their scale so that it's accurate. The other thing, because I've got 9 other grinders, I've checked my other grinders. I've got a Jolly Evo Tecumec, that was spot on. I did find it to be about a half a degree out, but that was mainly due to the wheel. When I say the wheel, a lot of times when you put a new grinding wheel on, you can get a little bit of run out. The wheel doesn't sit perfectly and can move from side to side. If it moves from side to side by about 0.5 millimeter, that can throw a half a degree out as well. I did check on a Oregon grinder. I found that near a half a degree to 1 degree out slightly. So, you know, I'm not going to grizzle about a half a degree or 1 degree. I expect to get some sort of error. You know, nothing's ever going to be perfect. But surprisingly enough, this was really spot on. I checked this, spent about a half an hour checking this with a protractor, a metal protractor that was laser etched. So I knew it was highly accurate, and this was spot on. So really happy with this. Very large scale to the... Now, the other thing that is also interesting, people, is that when we look at an Oregon type grinder and we're talking about tilting the head, they are in 5 degree increments, same as the Jolly Evo Tecumec. The A scale, that's on this Stihl USG grinder, is in 1 degree increments. But the Jolly Evo and the Oregon type grinders on the back, which is, we can actually show you that. We'll just take this over here. Where you adjust on this particular unit here, this scale here that tilts the head is in 5 degree increments, and it's just the same on all the Oregon type grinders. As you can see, it tilts to the right. So on this type of grinder, there's another adjustment at the back here, and there's a scale. It's on 5 degree increments, whereas on the Stihl USG grinder, and we'll just see whether you can see that, they are all in 1 degree increments, as you can see there. And the reason they're probably in the 1 degree increments is when you're doing those hedge trimmer blades. Remember I said before, they're either 6 degrees or 10 degrees. Some people might want 7 or 5, or they may have a preference. So I think that's the reason why Stihl have got a finer scale. But if you're going to have a finer scale, then there's no point it being out 3 degrees in the first place. So yes, hopefully this gets fixed in the future. Hopefully I get Stihl's attention. We'll see what happens. Look, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. Bye for now.